Have you ever judged someone by their appearance, and then discovered that this person did much more for the world than anyone imagined? Donna Emilia, 74 years old, was the kind of woman every neighborhood knew, but no one really saw. She lived in silence. She walked slowly, always carrying the same bags, at the same time every day. She lived alone in the faded blue house at the end of the street, the house many called strange to the neighborhood. Emilia was just a lonely lady. To some, she was unfriendly, to others, strange, and there was always someone whispering, "She lives locked up, she must be hiding something." No one ever tried to get to know her. No one ever knocked on her door. No one ever asked if she needed help. Her solitude became a source of jokes, and her silence a reason for suspicion. But the truth, the one no one dared to imagine, was right there, every day, in the heavy bags she carried without complaining. Inside them there were no purchases. There was care. There was life. There was a hidden love, the kind of love that doesn't ask for applause. On a hot night, a blackout hit the entire neighborhood. Houses were dark. Streets were shadowed. Residents were frightened. And it was in that instant, when no one could see anything, that a curious neighbor saw something he shouldn't have. At the back of Emilia's house, the basement door opened, and dozens of eyes shone in the darkness. The neighbor recoiled, terrified. He thought he had discovered a terrible secret. He took a picture. He spread it throughout the neighborhood. And before sunrise, everyone was saying the same thing. "I knew she was hiding something." But the next day, when they discovered what was really there, the whole street had to swallow its own prejudice and learn that sometimes the most ignored person is precisely the one who carries the biggest heart in the world. That morning, the neighborhood discovered that the loneliest woman was the one who saved the most lives without ever asking for anything in return. Donna Emilia wasn't born lonely. Life made her that way. As a girl, she grew up sharing a single room with 5 siblings. Her mother was a laundress. Her father was a construction worker and addicted to alcohol. Little affection, little attention, much struggle. There, still a child, she learned what forced silence was, the kind you use so as not to bother anyone. At 17, she married the first man who promised to take her away from home. He kept his promise, but brought another prison. A hard, impatient man, with no room for tenderness. She tried to be a good wife. She tried to talk, to try to change, to try to understand. But with time, she gave up and returned to living in silence. When he died too young and abruptly, the neighbors commented that she cried little, but no one knew that inside, she had been crying for years, and that death was only the end of a cycle of emotional abandonment. Without children, without close family, without any remaining friends, Emilia became the kind of woman the world learns to ignore. She retired as a cleaning lady, with little money and no expectation of attention from others, and she decided to live quietly. There was only one thing capable of making her heart beat differently: animals. Since childhood, they were her only source of comfort. While people treated her harshly, a hungry cat, a lame dog, or an injured bird always found affection in her hands. It was the only place where she knew how to give and receive love without fear. That's why, when she moved to that street, nobody noticed. But Emilia became the silent protector of all the abandoned animals in the area. The injured, the elderly, those that nobody wanted. They all found shelter in the faded blue house. She spent her own pension money. She suffered cold, hunger, and longing, but she never let them go hungry. And knowing that the neighborhood judged everything, she kept her affection hidden in the basement. Not out of shame, but out of fear that they would take away the only thing that gave meaning to her days. While the neighbors complained that she didn't talk, that she lived withdrawn, that she was strange, Emilia was there, saving invisible lives. She sewed little beds, improvised remedies, calmed traumatized animals. And each lick, each purr, each wagging tail was what sustained her weary heart. She didn't feel alone when she was with them. She felt alive. And the neighborhood, which judged her without knowing, continued to believe that she didn't cooperate. However, a constant fear grew within her. The fear of someone discovering what she did and trying to take everything away: her protected animals, her purpose, her small, silent family. She knew that the day they found out, her life would change forever. And that day was much closer than she imagined. Donna Amelia's routine began when the sun was still crawling across the sky. While the windows of the other houses remained closed, she was already on her feet, putting on her worn shoes and mentally checking her list of the day's needs: food, medicine, clean water, bandages. None of that was for her. The first sound of the morning was always the same: soft meows echoing down the hallway and the timid scratching of small nails calling for attention. They waited for her every day in the same way, as if the world depended on that improvised breakfast. And in a way, it did. Amelia put out water, carefully distributed bowls of food, and checked each one: the lame cat, the elderly dog, the puppy found in the trash, the blind dog that someone abandoned because it was no longer useful. She talked to them in a low voice, a mother's voice, a voice she could never use with her human children. After that, her hardest part began: pretending to live a normal life. She grabbed her simple bag, a cloth bag, and walked down the street as if she were just another retiree with too much time and too little company. The neighbors watched her with a mixture of indifference and venomous curiosity. There goes the grumpy one. She doesn't even say good morning. That woman is strange. But what few realized was that she did say good morning. It was just that they didn't respond. At the neighborhood market, she always asked for the cheapest pet food on sale. The clerk already knew the ritual. She would ask the price even knowing she could barely afford it, count on her fingers, and buy only what she needed. "Is that all today, Donna Amelia?" the young man asked. She would smile slightly, that short smile of someone who holds a whole life in their heart, and reply, "Only what I can carry, my son." She would return home carrying too much weight for someone so small. The neighbors saw the bags and invented stories. "She buys too much. There must be someone hiding in there. Who knows what they do all day?" If they knew that those bags sustained lives they didn't know, they would have said less. In the afternoon, Amelia cleaned, washed blankets, sterilized jars, changed bandages. Sometimes she cut strips of old clothes to improvise beds. Everything was done calmly, with care and precision, like someone who understands the silent language of pain. But the neighborhood only saw closed doors, and closed doors were unsettling. The children avoided her out of fear. The adults spoke of her as if talking about a problem without a solution. And each day, the unease grew. She never shows up. She never participates in anything. She never helps anyone. No one imagined that she helped more than all of them combined. At home, the radio played softly. Amelia sewed in silence, while a cat slept on her feet and a little dog rested its nose on her ankle. That was how she filled the loneliness, with body warmth, with calm breathing, with company that didn't require conversation. But the tranquility never lasted all day. In the cafe, at the market, on the street, she always noticed stares. There was always a whisper, a snide comment, a provocation disguised as curiosity. "Do you live alone? Why is that gate always closed? What do you keep in there?" Amelia always answered the same way, politely and distantly, not for lack of courage, but because she was afraid they would discover her secret, afraid of losing her little family of paws. And meanwhile, in the neighborhood association's online group, residents wrote, "We need to take action. She never cooperates. It's too strange for someone to live so isolated. I don't trust people who don't talk." None of them knew that she talked all the time, only to those who really listened. The tension gradually increased, as if the entire neighborhood was about to explode in wrong conclusions. Until one day, during an informal meeting between neighbors, someone suggested, "Let's officially complain about her, demand that she open the house. It's not normal to live like this." And the decision was made without Amelia having a chance to say a single word. That same afternoon, while the neighborhood plotted the complaint, she was kneeling on the basement floor, feeding a recently rescued cat. It trembled with fear, and she said, in the sweetest voice that had ever come from her mouth, "No one will hurt you here, my love. No one." The cruel irony was, the neighborhood thought she was a danger, when in reality she was the only refuge for so many lives. And on that stifling night, as Amelia lay exhausted, The neighbor's decision echoed through the street, approaching her like a storm about to break. The quiet life she had built was about to be turned upside down, and all because of a judgment that never did justice to her heart. The afternoon fell heavy, stifling, the kind that leaves the air still and the street silent. The whole neighborhood seemed tired, but no one as tired as Donna Emilia. She was returning from her last shopping trip of the day. Again, heavy bags. Again, short, slow steps. Again, curious glances trying to pierce her silence. People whispered as she passed. There she goes. Always with those bags. It must be something strange. She heard every word, but as always, remained silent. The sun was already beginning to set when she entered through the gate. She put the bags on the ground, wiped the sweat from her brow, and took a deep breath. Inside the bag, the sound of the medicines clinking together reminded her of the weight she alone carried. It was at that exact moment when she turned the key to the basement gate that everything happened. The light went out. A sudden blackout. The entire street plunged into absolute darkness. A dry silence took over the neighborhood, followed by murmurs, shouts of surprise, and cell phones being lit. And someone, by coincidence or fate, was passing on the other side of the street. The most curious and suspicious neighbor, Mr. Edgar. He never liked her. He never understood her silence. And he always wanted to find out what that old woman was hiding. In the dark, Edgar saw Emilia's small flashlight light up. A faint, flickering light, illuminating just enough to reveal a scene no one had ever seen. And then he saw Emilia carefully open the basement door. He saw the faint light reflecting on the steps, and he heard sounds that chilled him to the bone. First, the soft scratching of small nails on the floor. Then, soft meows, fragile cries, hurried breaths. And then, dozens of eyes gleaming in the dark. Small eyes, frightened eyes, eyes that trusted only her. Edgar froze. His cell phone illuminated the scene for only seconds, but seconds enough for him to take a blurry photo. And in that click, taken on impulse, Emilia's fate began to crumble. Without thinking, he ran home. He opened the neighborhood association's WhatsApp group and wrote, "I just saw it. She has a basement full of bugs. This is dangerous. It could be disease, dirt, infestation. We have to report it now." The photo followed. Blurred, dark, indistinct, but enough to ignite malicious imaginations. Messages exploded. "I knew she was hiding something. My God, how awful. Animals in the basement. That's unsanitary. We need to call the health department. That's a crime." None of them stopped to think. None of them imagined that those eyes didn't represent danger. They represented lives saved. And while the neighborhood group raged, Emilia carefully descended the basement stairs, illuminating frightened faces that only wanted affection. "Calm down, my loves. Mommy's here." She opened the bags, food, sachets, clean cloths. She worked there in silence, changing the water, cleaning bowls, stroking trembling heads. Outside, chaos began. The neighbors started gathering in the street, forming a small commotion with flashlights and cell phones. Some wanted to investigate, others wanted to solve. The truth was simple. Everyone wanted someone to blame to fill the boredom of life, and they found the perfect target in Emilia. When the lights came back on, the group grew, and soon someone suggested, "Let's go demand explanations." Now, Emilia didn't even notice the commotion. She climbed the stairs with a bowl of water in her hands, her body tired and her heart at peace, without imagining that the whole neighborhood was waiting outside. When she opened the door, she was startled to see the lights, the cell phones, the hard faces pointed at her. "Mrs. Emilia," said a woman in an accusatory voice, "you're going to have to explain this basement story." She froze. "Story?" she asked softly, not understanding. "The animals," someone shouted. "This is absurd. You could be bringing disease into the street. This is irresponsible." The voices began to overlap, aggressive, harsh, merciless. Emilia tried to answer, but her weak voice was lost. Just what?" interrupted Edgar, proud of the revelation. "The whole neighborhood has the right to know what you're hiding in there." For the first time in a long time, Emilia felt a real pain in her chest. Not because of the accusations, but because of the fear of losing those beings who were all she had. The neighbors began demanding that she open the basement in front of everyone. Some threatened to call the police. Others already wanted to break it down. And in that tumult and that sea of accusatory glances, Amelia leaned her back against the door, as if she were protecting a treasure. With a trembling voice, almost breathless, she could only say, "Please, don't hurt them." But it was no use. The commotion only grew, and before anyone could stop it, a neighbor had already called the health department and the zoonosis team. Amelia's fate was sealed. The silent woman, the ignored neighbor, was now surrounded, exposed, judged. And behind the door, dozens of lives depended on her to continue existing. The noise in front of the house seemed to increase every minute. And Donna Amelia, leaning against the basement door, felt her heart pounding erratically as if each accusation were a direct blow to her chest. She tried to take a deep breath, but the voices of the people cut through the air like blades. "It's absurd. This has to end today. Call someone to get rid of these animals." She wanted to explain. She wanted to ask for calm. She wanted someone, just one, to have the decency to ask politely. But no one asked. No one wanted to understand. They had already decided she was guilty before even hearing her side of the story. That hurt more than any words. Amelia had never been one to raise her voice, never one to defend herself, never known how to face crowds. She had always been silent, but now her silence seemed to be interpreted as confirmation of guilt. She placed a hand on her chest, trying to control the trembling. The greatest fear wasn't for herself, but for them. Down below, the small animals felt the commotion. Some meowed softly, frightened. Others huddled together, hoping that the person who always cared for them would still be there. Amelia closed her eyes for a second. "I promised that no one else would abandon you," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I promised." When she opened her eyes, she saw the health inspector's car turning the corner. The ground seemed to disappear beneath her feet. The neighborhood opened up like a corridor, proud of having solved the problem. Cell phones started recording. People pushed each other to get the best angle, as if it were a spectacle. The team got out of the car with clipboards, equipment, professional posture, but without aggression. They hadn't come to judge. They had come to do the job. And that, in a way, made Amelia even more nervous. "Good afternoon, ma'am," said the veterinarian. "We received a complaint. We need to go in." Amelia's face paled. "Go in. Take them away. Mess with the only beings that gave meaning to her life." She gripped the corner of the door as if holding her own soul. Her hands trembled so much that it was almost impossible to maintain a steady hand. "Please." The voice didn't come out, just a hoarse whisper. "Ma'am, we need to check," the professional insisted patiently. "It's just protocol." The neighbors behind murmured excitedly, as if they were about to witness a public punishment. "Open it up already," someone shouted. "If you shouldn't, why are you trembling?" Another provoked. Typical of people who hide something wrong. And something inside Amelia broke. It wasn't just shame. It was powerlessness. It was years of invisible loneliness transforming into sudden judgment. It was the deep fear of losing the only beings she called family. Her body weakened. Her legs went weak. She had to hold onto the wall to avoid falling. The veterinarian noticed. "Ma'am, are you all right?" Amelia tried to answer, but her voice choked with sobs. They have no one," she finally said, tears streaming down her face. "If you take them, they'll die alone. Like I died too." The silence that followed was instantaneous. For a moment, even the neighbors stopped. It was the first time in many years that anyone had seen Amelia truly break down. Not as the strange old woman, not as the closed-off woman, but as a human being, hurt, exhausted, and full of love. The veterinarian approached slowly. "Mrs. Amelia, no one will take anything unnecessarily. I promise. Can we go inside and see?" Amelia hesitated. She looked at the gate, at the crowd hungry for conclusions. And then she looked at the veterinarian firm, sincere eyes. She took a deep breath. She wiped away her tears with her sleeve. And she took a step to the side. The basement door opened. And with it, all the truths that the neighborhood had refused to see for years were about to emerge from the darkness. When the basement door opened, what came out wasn't a bad smell, dirt, or chaos as many had expected. What came was a silence full of life. The veterinarian's flashlight gradually illuminated the space. And then, One by one, the neighbors began to notice. There were clean beds scattered on the floor, folded blankets, recently changed water bowls, organized shelves with medicines, gauze, saline solution, bandages, ointments, bags of pet food piled in the corner, everything impeccable. And amidst all this, little noses appeared. An elderly cat with patchy fur raised its head. A lame dog wagged its tail, even though it was startled by so many people. Two puppies huddled together, their eyes patched with care. A huge black cat settled in an improvised bed with the expression of a wounded king. The veterinarian smiled, unable to help it. "My God," she murmured, moved. "They are well cared for, very well cared for." The neighbors began to whisper, some perplexed, others even embarrassed. "But that's not what I expected. Look there, new beds. She takes better care of them than many people take care of their own children." The veterinarian turned to Emilia. "You take care of them all by yourself?" Emilia ran a trembling hand over her face. I found each one of them on the street. The old ones, the sick ones, the ones nobody wanted. I couldn't leave them there. I brought them and took care of them. That's all." A heavy silence filled the street. But now it was no longer a silence of accusation. It was one of shock, of respect, of shame. The professional team walked a few more steps, examining every corner. Clean beds, organized food, no sign of mistreatment. On the contrary, there is care here, love. The veterinarian looked directly at the group of neighbors, especially at the man who had taken the photo, and started the commotion. "Gentlemen, this is not a case of irresponsible hoarding. This is animal rescue. It's a work of love. It's something few people would have the courage and heart to do." Emilia almost collapsed with relief. Her hands finally stopped trembling. But the truth hadn't finished revealing itself yet. The veterinary assistant found a box with several envelopes. He opened one out of curiosity and found that they contained dates, notes, small reports. "Are these files?" he asked. Emilia blushed. I keep track of them. Weight, medication, improvement, everything is written down. I learned to take care of them, you know. I read, asked questions, studied on my own." The veterinarian became even more emotional. "You're incredible, Donna Emilia." A brief murmur ran through the neighbors, a mixture of surprise, guilt, and admiration. And then, something unexpected happened. The lame dog, the one that had been trembling with fear, came out from behind the bed and approached Emilia, touching its snout to her leg as if to say, "I know who you are." And in that simple gesture, everything made sense. It wasn't about abasement. It wasn't about mysterious bags. It wasn't about a strange neighbor. It was about love. The silent love of a woman who had lost everything and found in the helpless little ones a reason to keep living. The veterinarian took a deep breath and announced, "No one here will be removed. On the contrary, you deserve help, not judgment." The neighbor who had started the accusations took a timid step forward. "Mrs. Emilia, I didn't know. I swear I didn't know." She didn't answer, not out of malice but because she was still in emotional shock. After years of being invisible, suddenly there were dozens of people looking at her, but now with respect. Another neighbor secretly wiped away tears. "We thought so wrongly of you." An older woman held Emilia's hands. "We failed you, my daughter." Emilia took a deep breath, fighting back tears. I just didn't want them to die alone. Like I died too," she repeated in a painful whisper. And this time, many people cried. The truth was finally there. Clear, brilliant, undeniable. Donna Emilia wasn't just a neighborhood stranger. She was the heart no one dared to know. When the gate finally closed and the rescue team drove away, a different kind of silence filled the street. Not the heavy silence that had always accompanied Donna Emilia for years, but a respectful silence. A silence of those who realized too late that they had judged without knowing, that they had pointed the finger without looking her in the eye, that they had ignored a woman who never asked for anything but gave everything. The neighbors gradually dispersed, walking slowly, like those carrying a guilt they didn't know where to put. The news spread like wildfire. That same night, the entire neighborhood knew the truth. And for the first time in a long time, Emilia's loneliness began to crack. The next morning, when she opened the door, something she always did quickly, discreetly, Unseen, she found a box on the sidewalk. Inside were packages of pet food, sachets, veterinary soap, and a simple note, handwritten in timid handwriting. "Forgive me for not seeing you sooner." She held the paper delicately, as if holding a piece of something rare, respect. And that was just the beginning. The next day, another box, then another, and another. Food, blankets, medicine, toys, beds. The entire neighborhood, the same neighborhood that judged her, accused her, pointed fingers at her, was now mobilizing to help her. Some children began to knock on the gate, calling softly, "Mrs. Amlia, can I see the kittens?" Others came with their parents. Some came shyly, others excitedly, all with the same question in their eyes. "Can we help?" And for the first time in many years, Amlia felt she no longer needed to carry everything alone. She opened the gate, slowly, fearfully, but she opened it. And what happened next was something she never imagined. Entire families helping to change water bowls, sweep the yard, organize medicine, clean litter boxes. The house that was once isolated became a meeting point. The children began to call the animals by name. The teenagers helped renovate the basement, putting up new shelves, painting walls, and installing lighting. The adults organized a rotation for buying pet food and paying for veterinary expenses. Suddenly, Amlia was no longer invisible. She was no longer the strange old lady of the neighborhood. She was no longer the judged and misunderstood woman. She was the heart of the neighborhood. The strength hidden behind a silence. The woman who inspired everyone without ever having uttered a loud word. And yet, even with so much change, she remained humble. She simply observed everything with that small, shy, almost childlike smile. A smile that had been kept hidden for years and years of solitude. One day, while she was sweeping the yard, now always accompanied by a volunteer, little Miguel, one of the neighbors who used to run from her in fear, held her hand and asked, "Aunt Amlia, why did you do all this alone?" She crouched down with difficulty, tucked her white hair behind her ear, and answered with a sincerity that pierced the air, "Because I knew what it was like to have no one, and I didn't want them to feel the same." And Miguel, at 8 years old, hugged Amlia tightly. A warm hug, a real hug, the hug of a child who understands things through their heart and not the world. That hug, that simple gesture, was the moment she realized something important. She was no longer alone. The whole street began to recognize her, to greet her, to respect her. The neighbor who had accused her, weeks later, appeared at her door with a huge bag of pet food and his eyes full of tears. "I was wrong about you. Would you allow me to help?" She simply nodded. She didn't need words. He understood. Things were changing. Slowly, but changing. And Dona Amlia felt something she no longer remembered. Belonging. The noise of conversations at the gate, the coming and going of people offering help, the laughter of children playing with the animals. All of that brought a warmth she thought she would never feel again. Her loneliness, so deep, so marked, finally found healing. And every time a neighbor said, "You're an example, Dona Amlia," she would softly reply, "I didn't do anything extraordinary. I just took care of what no one saw." But everyone knew, everyone understood, everyone felt it. Her kindness, the silent and invisible kindness she carried for so many years, had changed the entire neighborhood. And now the neighborhood was changing her life in return. An invisible love became shared love. An old pain became community strength. And the woman who had once been ignored was now honored, seen, respected, applauded in silence, the kind of applause only the heart hears. There are people in the world who shine without needing light. People who don't appear in photos, don't post achievements, don't ask for recognition, but who, silently, keep the whole world standing. Dona Amlia was one of them. While many pointed the finger, she pointed with her heart. While some murmured criticism, she murmured prayers for the animals she cared for. While the neighborhood judged her for her loneliness, she filled her own life with love, a love that no one saw, but that was there, pulsating in the details, sustaining small lives that the entire neighborhood ignored. And that's the point that almost no one understands. The truest kindness is the one that no one applauds. It's the kindness that is born from real empathy, from the will to make a difference even when no one is watching. It's the kindness that doesn't seek an audience, it seeks purpose. Donna Amelia didn't talk much, but her whole life was a clear and profound message. Do good, even if the world calls you strange. How many people today don't carry a huge but hidden heart? How many women live in silence, doing good for others without expecting anything in return? How many times do we judge someone by their sad appearance, their closed house, their reserved manner, without imagining that that person might be carrying twice the pain and offering 3 times the love? It's easy to point fingers. It's easy to laugh. It's easy to ignore. What's difficult is seeing beyond the obvious. What's difficult is having sensitivity. What's difficult is understanding that each person carries a story and that some stories are too big to fit into the hurried gaze of others. The truth is, the whole neighborhood judged Amelia, and the whole neighborhood was wrong. They saw loneliness, but they were witnessing feminine strength. They saw strangeness, but it was true compassion. They saw silence, but it was love for animals. They saw isolation, but it was protection. They saw an anti-community woman, but she was precisely the one who most moved the community even without knowing it. And it took a blackout. It took a door opening. It took a single curious glance for everyone to see what had always been there. If there's anything this story teaches, it's this. Not everything that seems empty is lifeless, and not all silence means absence. Sometimes those who are quiet are caring. Sometimes those who are alone are carrying the world without complaining. Sometimes the person no one notices is the one whose absence is most missed. Donna Amelia transformed an entire neighborhood, but she did it without speeches, without teachings, without demands. She did it in her own way, with care, with tenderness, with persistence. And now, I want to ask you who heard this story. Do you know someone like that? Someone invisible, but gigantic inside? Someone silent, but full of love? Someone who deserves to be seen and recognized much more than they are? If so, share the story with that person. Or simply leave a comment here saying, I know an invisible kindness. And if you are that person, if you do good without an audience, if you fight for small lives, for forgotten causes, for kindnesses that no one sees, know this. The world desperately needs people like you. Now, like, comment, and follow the channel. Be part of this community of women who overcome pain, injustice, and invisibility and transform the world with silent love and true strength. Every day we tell real, profound, and human stories. Stories of ordinary people, but with extraordinary courage. Because, in the end, the greatest beauty in the world lies in the stories that no one sees, until the day they change everything.